Hello and welcome to Gefet in the Daf Yomi. I'm Yael Shimoni from Yeshivat Risha, bringing you together with Adran a little bit more depth into your learning of Gemara in Q Daf Yomi. And today we have a special sugya dealing with Birkat Cohanim, which has a very, very central tosfot in it, which will teach us a lot about Birkat Cohanim and a few very beautiful ideas and machlokot between the Rishonim. So let's begin. The sugya starts from an assumption that we know already from what you've learned before, that a person who is shikar, who drank too much wine, cannot be mevarech, cannot bless Birkat Kohanim. And the Gemara asks why? Where do we know that? Where do we learn? Where is it written in the Torah that you're not allowed to be shikor if you are doing a baracha? Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi has an answer, and he says, we learned that because of Nazir. The Parsha of Nazir is written just before the Parsha of Birkat Kohanim. Says Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, a Nazir is asur in wine. He cannot drink wine. And we have Birkat Kohanim, the blessing of the Kohanim right after. So that's why Kohanim cannot be drunk when they are giving the bracha to Am Yisrael. Asks the Gemara, if you are right, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the Kohanim would not be allowed to drink any wine, not only to be drunk, but even just a taste of wine or even just a grape would be problematic for the Kohanim if you're learning it from Nazir. That's why Rabbi Yitzchak offers a different answer. And he says, no, we did not learn this from Nazir. We learned it from a different pasuk. There's a pasuk in Sefer Devarim saying that the Kohanim are la'amod lesharet ulevarech b'shmo. That the Kohanim do two things. They are meshartim in Bet HaMikdash, and they're also mevarchim, meshartim and mevarchim. Says Rabbi Yitzchak, from this pasuk we learned that the dining of a mesharet, the dining of a Kohen that works in the Mikdash, are the same dining of a Kohen who is blessing Am Yisrael. And that's why if a person who's working in Bet HaMikdash can eat grapes and is only not allowed to drink wine, therefore to be drunken, therefore a person who is being mevarech can drink wine but cannot be drunken. And that's what Rashi helps us understand here. Rashi says that if you'll read specifically well the halachot of the Kohanim working in Bet HaMikdash, you will see the Kohanim working in Bet HaMikdash are allowed to drink but are not allowed to be drunken. So that's what Rabbi Yitzchak says. Asks the Gemara, if you're right, Rabbi Yitzchak, that we learn from Avodah of Bet HaMikdash, a Kohen will not be allowed to be mevarech the people, even if he has a problem with his leg, if he's Baal Mum, or he has a problem with his nose. There's a whole list of mumim, all kinds of problems with the body, that if a person has these, he has to refrain from being working in Bet HaMikdash. And that is not true when it comes to bracha. So what does the Gemara do here? It actually works with two dinim that the Gemara knows already in advance. The Gemara knows that a drunk cannot be mevarech, but you can drink wine. And the Gemara knows that a person who has mum can be mevarech, but he can't be working in the Bet Mikdash. So how does this work? The Gemara asks that and says, oh, I have an answer. Because Birkat Kohanim is in the middle, it's connected to two different worlds. It is connected to Nazir, like Rashbag said, like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said. And it's also connected to the working of the Mikdash, like Rabbi Yitzchak said. So you take from two worlds the lesser part. You can be Baal Mum because you learned that from Nazir, and you can drink wine because you learned that from Avodat Bet HaMikdash. Ask the Gemara, why? If I am thinking that the bracha is in between two worlds, I would be taking the chumrot of both worlds. I would say that a Kohen is not allowed to be Baal Mum, and he's also not allowed to drink wine. Why are we taking the easy parts from these two things? Why aren't we taking the chumrot? Answers the Gemara, I'll tell you why. Because these different worlds are not really connected midoraita. They're only an asmachta. And because it's an asmachta, it's just midorabanan, and therefore we go lekula. So we learned a few things on the Gemara. We learned that the teaching that Birkat Kohanim is connected to Nazir and to the Avodah of the Mikdash are not 100% true. It is only an asmachta be'alma. So Birkat Kohanim is a world in its own. It's a world that has its special dinim. We learn them by slight connection to other worlds, but these are not strong connections. Therefore, when a Kohen is being mevarech Birkat Kohanim, it's not as if he's working in the temple. No, he's doing a totally different thing. He's doing a bracha. True, there's a pasuk that connects them together, but that's not a strong and real connection. That is the Gemara. Let's continue to the Tosfot because the Tosfot takes us to a whole different story and a whole different kushya and teruts, and we will return to the learning of the pshat of the Gemara very soon. The Tosfot starts by stating the following. A, he says to me, Yael, I learned from the Gemara that because we learned from Nazir, if I have a mum and I'm a Kohen, I can still be mevarech. So that we know already. We know that because we've learned up till now that we understood that the bracha is not really like an avoda, right? It's not really connected to avoda. So okay, a Baal Mum can also be mevarech. Continues the Tosfot and says, from here there is room to prove that a kohen who worked avoda zara and he was makriv in a house of avodah zara, or he became a muma, that he decided to stop being Jewish and to become something else, he can still be mevarech birkat kohanim. How do we know this? Because it says in the Mishnah in Menachot that those who were working avodah zarah are still a kohanim who have worked avodah zarah are like baalei mumim. Here in the sugya we learned that a baal mum is kasher to be mevarech birkat kohanim. Wow, what a statement from the Tosfot. So the first question we'll ask is this accepted? Are there any cholkim? Are there any rishonim that disagree with the Tosfot on this huge chidush here in the sugya? So let's go through two different other Tosfot and other Masechtot that show us that indeed there are cholkim and big cholkim, what the Tosfot said here in Tanit. So the first Tosfot we'll learn is in Masechet Sota, which is another place where we learn about Birkat Kohanim. And there, the Tosfot begins by bringing a person who is cholek on his chiddush. And he quotes Rav Achai Gaon from the Sheiltot, and Rav Achai Gaon from the Sheiltot says that if a Kohen worked in a place of Avodah Zarah or was being mumar, he decided to stop being Jewish and to become something else, he cannot be mevarech Am Yisrael anymore. Why? Because he's worse than a person who killed someone by mistake. If a person kills someone by mistake and he's a Kohen, he cannot be nosek kapayim. He cannot be blessing the kahal. So says Rav Achai, the same thing goes if he was Oved Avodah Zarah. But continues the Tosfot and says, and we are cholking. Who is the cholek? Rabbeinu Gershom Me'or HaGolah, the Rav of Rashi, Rabbeinu Gershom. He came up and said that is not true. A person who's a Kohen, who became a mumar, who stopped being Jewish and turned into a different religion, if he did tshuva, he can go back to be mevarech the people. Before we continue, let me tell you that Rabbeinu Gershom had a child, a boy, a son, who turned to Christianity. We do not know if it was by force or by choice, but we do know that he never came back. And it could be that Rabbeinu Gershom is thinking of his kid and of other boys of his community who became Umarim, and some of them are coming back into Judaism. And says Rabbeinu Gershom, they are allowed to be nosek kapayim. Why? Because Yael says Rabbeinu Gershom, you have to go and learn the Mishnah and Menachot, and you'll see I'm right. And besides that, you should know that I'm right about the Mishnah and Menachot because you must open up openings for someone who wants to be choser b'tshuva, and you must give him every chance you can so he will come back to Judaism. So that's Rabbeinu Gershom. So, because we know now that Rabbeinu Gershon's Shita is what's in the background of the Tosfot, and we know that's all based on Menachot, let's go to Menachot and see what's written there. So, the Mishnah in Menachot states the following. If you have Cohanim who worked in Beit Chonyo is like a Bama. It was like Beit Mikdash, but only in Egypt. So, they cannot work in Beit HaMikdash anymore. And also, if they were really Oved Avodah Zarah, of course that they are not allowed to be Oved in Beit HaMikdash anymore. But they eat like their brothers, as if they were Baalei Mumim, says the Mishnah. Tosfot quotes two books and two different readings of this Mishnah. The first, the Tosfot says, Sefer Zahir, which is also a book of Geonim, like Rav Achai, but different Geonim, said that how do you read this Mishnah? This Mishnah says that a Kohen that was Oved Avodah Zarah is no longer a Kohen. So why is he eating with his brothers like a Baal Mum? Mishum Darkei Shalom, says the Sefer Zahir. But, says the Tosfot, Rashi had a different reading of the Mishnah. Like Rabbeinu Gershom, Rashi said, no, if the Mishnah says that a Kohen that was Oved Avodah Zarah is now doing Teshuva, it's like Baal Mum, it means he's really like a Baal Mum, and like a Baal Mum, he can be Nosek Kapayim. So that's the machloket between Sefer Zahir and between Rashi. So, what have we seen up till now? We've seen a huge machloket. Rabbeinu Gershom, as opposed to Rav Achai. Rashi, as opposed to Sefer Zahir. Different shitos in understanding whether or not a Kohen who was being Oved Avodah Zarah can have a takana and be like a Baal Mum after he's chozer b'tshuva. Who else is cholek on the Tosfot? So here we have a big bar plukta, the Rambam. The Rambam follows the Geonim and says the following: Kohen she'avad avodat kochavim. Ben be'ones ben b'shgaga. If a Kohen was Oved Avodah Zarah, it doesn't matter why and how, what happened. Even though he was chozer b'tshuva, he can never be blessing the people because it says in the Mishnah that if you worked on the Bamot, you are not allowed to get back to the Mikdash, and a bracha is like a voda, says the Rambam. So we see that the Rambam is cholek on the Tosfot, but it could be when we read the Rambam that the reason the Rambam is cholek is maybe he's cholek on the Gemara in Tainis, because the Rambam here said that the blessing of the Cohanim is like a voda. So if it's like a voda, I understand the Rambam. Does the Tosfot agree to the Rambam, or maybe the Tosfot thinks like Tani that bracha is not really like a voda, and that's why a Kohen can be nosek kapayim even though he was Oved Avodah Zarah. So bear with me and let's look closely again at Rashi that was quoted in the Tosfot we just read, and we will see that Tosfot agrees with the Rambam. Tosfot also thinks that a bracha is like an avoda. And even so, he thinks that a Kohen, that the Teshuva can still be nosek kapayim. And that's a greater chiddush than what we could ever imagine. So let's see, how can I prove this? We at first thought that the Tosfot in Ta'anit is based on the Gemara, that the Ta'anit Gemara said that the connection to Avoda is only an asmachta. But the Tosfot in Menachot gave a different explanation. Tosfot in Menachot said, why is a Baal Mum allowed to be nosek kapayim? Not because it's an asmachta, no, because when you learn from avoda, you only learn that you have to be standing. It's avoda, but only in the din of standing. All the other dinim are mutar in a kohen for baracha. Where did the Tosfot bring this? This is not written in our Gemara. Well, it's written in another Gemara. The source of this is in the Gemara Masechet Sota. Masechet Sota is another place, and actually the bigger area where in the Gemara Birkat Cohanim is taught. We have a few segments of Birkat Cohanim. One is in Tanit, but the bigger one is in Sota. And in Sota you have a Braita saying the following. Rav Natan says, how do I know that a Kohen has to be blessing standing? Because we learned a Hekesh from Bracha to Avoda. It says, L'sharto levarech bishvo, and if you're Mesharet, you have to be standing. So if you're Mevarech, you have to be standing. And Mesharet himself, how do you know that he has to be standing? Because it says to stand and to be Mesharet. So we see that according to Rabbeinu Gershom and Rashi and Tosfot, a Kohen that is blessing is actually doing a kind of an avoda. And even though it's an avoda, he is still mutar to do it if he's Baal Mum and if he was chozer b'tshuva. So I'm summing up what we saw. The machloket between the Rishonim is huge. It's not a machloket between the Masechtot. The Masechtot are cholek, Ta'anit, and Sotah, whether or not the learning from Avoda is serious. According to Sotah, it is, and according to Ta'anit, it's not. But the Rishonim go with Ta'anit. Both Rambam and both Tosfot and both Rashi and both Rabbeinu Gershom and Rav Achai, all of them follow Sotah and not Ta'anit. And still, the machloket stands, and the machloket is brought in the Shulchan Aruch. And the Shulchan Aruch says the following: Amumar la'avodat kochavim, lo yisa et kapav, veyesh omrim, and some say that if he did tshuva, he is noseh kapayim, vechen ikar. So the Tosfot is machriya lehalacha that if a Kohen did tshuva for becoming an oved avodah zarah or a mumar, he can be noseh kapayim even though Nasiat Kapayim is a kind of an avoda. So today we were very, very lucky to have an opening to a big machloket between the Rishonim and different reading of the sugyot. I hope you enjoyed this lovely sugya, and we'll meet again next week to finish together the Gemara Masechet Ta'anit. Take care.